Alaikum, everyone, and greetings of peace to everyone who is joining us today. I am the founder and executive director of the Islamic Networks Group, which is also known as ING. This is the fourth of a five-part series ING is doing on intra-Muslim racism. Ordinarily, ING is engaged, as many of you know, in teaching in American public institutions about Islam in the context of both religious and ethnic pluralism. But in light of the Black Lives Matter movement, the Muslim team at ING felt it was extremely important also to address racism within Muslim American spaces. And that team included Rahima Ramzani, one of our program managers, Ishaq Batan, who is our Bay Area director, and Amina Jandali, one of the founding members of the organization, who all contributed to the development of the series, in addition to our African-American Muslim consultants and friends who are too many to name here, but three of them are with us today, and I'm very happy to introduce you to them later. Just a quick review of where we are in this series. The first webinar, which we held on July 15th, addressed a bit of the history of Islam in America, which begins with enslaved Muslim Africans. The second webinar of the series, which we held on July 29th, addressed African-American Islam today by looking at its many institutions, thought leaders, scholars, and activists. And the third webinar, which was held 2 weeks ago on August 12th, began the conversation on racism by first addressing the roots of racism in the United States, going back to the period of European colonialism and the construction of the idea of race, which leads to racism, and the consequent racialization of groups into white, brown, and Black categories, which were then placed in a hierarchy in which certain qualities and characteristics were attributed to each group. And we also covered in the last webinar how different forms of bigotry today towards various groups of people, including Indigenous peoples, Asians, Latinx, Muslims, and Jews, are both interrelated and interdependent, including the racialization of people of European origins who are categorized as whites, which leads to the idea of whiteness that we're all dealing with today. So that last webinar conversation was a perfect introduction and segue to this one that we're having today. And today we're directly addressing racism within the Muslim American community. And by the way, the recordings of all of these webinars are at the Islamic Networks Group Facebook page, and you are free to view them. They've been viewed over 50,000 times already, and we're really pleased by that, and we're hoping that people will benefit from them. And by way of an introduction to the topic today, let me share with you results of surveys that were done on intra-Muslim racism. First, it's important to point out that according to Gallup, more than 1/3 of American Muslims are African-American. More than 1/3, that's over 33%. And according to another poll by the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding, which is known as ISPU, the estimate is around 28%. So it's pretty close to the first one. Now, as far as intra-Muslim racism is concerned, according to an independent study that was published on the ISPU website, the author said the following, and I quote, "Unfortunately, African-American Muslims face intra-Muslim racism from other immigrant Muslim communities, namely South Asians and Arabs. Existing research on intra-Muslim racism is limited. Muslim Arc, which is an organization that is based in Southern California, released their preliminary study of race relations in June 2015. And based on this research, and anecdotally, many African-American Muslims, including youth, constantly face ethnic and racial discrimination from within the American Muslim community," end of quote. In addition, a survey that was done by the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding in 2017 found that 1 in 3 Black Muslims, and I quote, 1 in 3 Black Muslims said a fellow believer, another Muslim, discriminated against them because of their race in the past year at least once. I'm sure there are other surveys that are out there. These are the ones that I was able to easily find. on this topic, but I did find a lot of articles that have been written by prominent African American Muslims. And here's an excerpt of one from a June article this year by Imam Luqman Ahmed, who said, and I quote, "As the American battle with racism comes to a boil, Muslim America has its own festering racial problem between Black American Muslims and the larger Muslim American immigrant community. The question of racism in Muslim America has never been fully unpacked as a national American Muslim conversation. Sure, it's been hinted at, pointed to, glossed over, generalized, and even headlined in articles here and there. Still, the issue has never been domestically unwrapped and laid bare, so it could be subject to critical and compartmental examination. There has never been any resolution, reckoning, or healing." End of quote. A young Muslim American author writes in 2017, and I quote, "The Muslim community is a global community of diversity, variety, and color. We are taught to accept every Muslim and non-Muslim with complete disregard to their color, nationality, or ethnicity. Yet somehow Black Muslims experience racism from our brothers and sisters in Islam. Every attempt to tackle these issues has been swept under the rug with the phrase, 'One ummah, brother, we accept no racism in Islam.' How can you explain the feeling of superiority towards Black and brown people? Why are we still finding excuses in anti-Blackness in the Muslim community? When we're not willing to accept these problems proactively, the problem festers." End of quote. So today we're hoping to begin to address intra-Muslim racism by looking only at the Bay Area community, which doesn't necessarily represent the rest of the country in terms of relations between African American Muslims and Arab and South Asian Muslims. So I want you to keep that in mind as we go through this. And with us to have this conversation are three friends of mine. They're also consultants to the organization, who were courageous enough to join me today. And I say that because I strongly believe that victims of bigotry have absolutely no obligation to help perpetrators of racism to deal with their bigotry. We must not burden them with any such responsibility, nor should they be placed in a position where they have to relive trauma or any bad experience to help us deal with problems that we should be addressing ourselves. So they're doing this as a favor to me, and I really appreciate that. So tonight, instead of asking them to tell me about the racism that they've experienced, I will be asking a lot of questions about what I think would be considered markers of internal racism in our communities. And if you, the person watching this, find that these problems exist, then you probably have internal racism issues in your own community that you should equally address. I have an opinion that's going to be posted on my blog that reflects these questions that I'm going to ask, so don't worry about writing down some of the questions that I'll be asking, but so we'll just go ahead and get started with the questions. And so I think my colleague Ishaq is going to go ahead and turn on the cameras for everyone. And I'm sure that they, okay, great. And hopefully all of them will now appear on the screen with me. And I will go ahead and introduce them. One is Imam Fahim Shoaib, who is the resident Imam of Masjid Warithin in Oakland, California for 36 years. I've been attending his mosque for probably 28 years. I've attended many of his Jummahs. Also with us is Imam Abu Qadr al-Amin, who's the resident Imam of the San Francisco Muslim Community Center for the last 30 years. And Imam Abu Qadir's masjid was the first masjid that I actually entered when I started practicing Islam about 30 years ago. And he was also the Imam that married my husband and I, which was a wonderful event at his home. And then also with us is Sister Amila El-Amin, who is a Muslim African-American human rights activist, and she's the co-founder of the nonprofit Moeed that serves elders and families in Oakland, California. She is doing incredible work, and we're very happy to work with her as well. So welcome to all of you, and salam alaikum. So I've divided up these questions in two parts. One deals with institutional racism and the other with interpersonal racism. And as you answer these questions, imams and Sister Amila, I want you to please focus on your own experiences and that of other African-American Muslims in your own communities based on what you know or what you've heard from others. Okay, so hopefully everybody's microphone is on and I can go ahead and get started. So, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful. So let me begin with the first one. And the first question is, how often has there been engagement over the last few decades between your organization and non-Black Bay Area mosques and organization? Has it been weekly, monthly, quarterly, or annually? So we'll start with Imam Fahim.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. You know, if I spread it out over the years,
Mm-hmm.
I don't fear contradiction that, hey, let's call it once a year or something, like, you know, just say something in the course of that year. And that doesn't include the Eids. You know, the Eids, you know, is like, you know, that's kind of a normal, and that's a good thing. You know, to put it lightly. But I would say it's probably at least like once a year.
Once a year.
Beyond the Eids. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Imam Abu Qadir.
Yes. Assalamu alaikum. I would say, looking back over the years, there was a period from the late 80s through the 90s, around 97, 98, where I was extensively involved with immigrant organizations, working on political issues, some working on social issues. So because of the nature and the population of San Francisco, it's a little more diverse. So the San Francisco Muslim Community Center, since me becoming the imam there in 1984, 36 years ago, 36 years of service there, it's always been a segment of the community center that represented diverse interests, not just the needs of African Americans. And as a leader that was trying to be responsible to those members who supported me, I got involved in some of those activities, and that's been ongoing until today.
Within your own mosque?
Within my own mosque, and with others who had affiliations with other organizations outside of the mosque. Some of them worked in San Francisco, but also belonged to mosques in the East Bay and the South Bay and on the peninsula. So I had ongoing relationships with some of them.
What about mosque to mosque, your mosque with other mosques, institutionally?
With the Islamic Society of the East Bay, which is now the Bilal Mosque out on Peace Terrace. We were a part of that development. We helped organize the fundraising around that particular event. We helped raise some of the money. We got Imam W.D. Muhammad to agree to come and raise money for that particular event. Along that was with, a long time we got ago. A pledge. Yeah, that was actually it was 1988, November the 5th. The Loma Prieta earthquake took place on November the 4th, and the fundraising event, that's why I can remember the exact date. The fundraising event took place at the Marriott Hotel in San Francisco the very next day. And Fahim and myself, we had to ride all the way around the Bay Area to get Imam back and forth to his hotel because the bridge was out. So I remember that particular day. And so we were an integral part of that development under the leadership of Rifat Mahmoud and
Yes.
Saeed Namdar. They were
Mhm.
leaders of the Islamic Society of the East Bay at that particular time.
Okay. Okay. Sister Amila,
Hmm.
engagement between your organization and other Muslim organizations, non-Black Muslim organizations.
Bismillah. So I would have to speak engagement as far as me, because most of what I do, or most of what I've done over the years up until recently, has not been done under my organization. It's just been done as community service.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that engagement has been a lot because because one of the things that I do is feed the homeless. And so whenever someone needs to feed the homeless, they got to come to people who know where the homeless are.
Mm-hmm.
And so for over, I would say, 15, 16, 17 years, I have been leading caravans around Oakland when people want to feed the hungry. They say, "Oh, we want to feed the hungry." Someone says, "Okay, call Sister Mila, she'll help you." And so I would have to say it's been a lot over, I would say I can't even say like once or twice, because Ramadan comes, everybody wants to feed the hungry. Different times of the year happen, and there's this desire to assist those less fortunate. And so a lot of times when you're coming from a community that is not doesn't have homelessness or hunger present, you have to go to a community where it's at to be able to do that work, and you need someone to be able to guide you through it.
So have some of those communities been immigrant communities? The communities that you've worked-
99.9% of them communities have been immigrant
communities. Wow, that's amazing. So I think you've all answered sort of the second question that I had, which is, when engagements has taken place, what has been the purpose? Have you felt, that you were an integral part of that engagement? Was your feedback solicited? Did you feel that your feedback was incorporated or taken seriously in these events? Has it been generally positive every time you've had those engagements with immigrant communities?
So I'll
Go ahead.
answer that. One, I would say yes, my input has been been incorporated, because it's
People
neat.
listen to you.
And one of the things that and I'm just being 100, like one of the things that in my first encounter years ago, in a lot of immigrant communities, the men and the women don't intermix. And so, and they're definitely not led around by women in a lot of instances. And so in the beginning, it would kind of start out as this awkward encounter, but because the intentions are sincere and both people are really there to do the work, I have formed some really beautiful relationships with some immigrant, and I don't know if it's safe for me to say that, but with some immigrant brothers, because most of the work that I do, a lot of times is with the brothers, because those are the ones who go out and do that work. Here in recent years, there's been a lot more sisters doing it, but some years back, most of it was brothers.
Because the majority of the people that receive your help, you said, were immigrants, right?
When I say receive my help, I mean they want to feed the homeless, they want to feed the hungry, and to do that in their neighborhood is not usually a lucrative effort. And so you have to come into the inner city. You have to come into and if you don't know the inner city, then you need someone to guide you and where to go, and and the engagement and that sort of thing.
Okay, but most of the people that accept your charity are they immigrants, or are they African American?
They're African American.
They're African Americans, and so these immigrants are helping you to deliver food. Okay.
I'm helping them. I'm helping.
You're helping them, right? So that's been the nature. Okay, okay, that's the nature of the relationship. Imam Fahim, what has been the nature of the engagement when you've had it? Imam Fahim, you said Eid, you come together.
Yeah, I mean, mashallah, I think as Imam Abu Qadir was saying,
Yeah.
the demographic of San Francisco, the nature of the San Francisco Muslim community, along with the fact that I tip my hat to Imam Al-Amin as someone who reaches out and someone who engages people. I've come to more invitations from him that engage me with the non-Black Muslim community because of his connections with them. So I find myself supporting many things that he has developed. I think about this while we talk about this political engagement. One of the last things was what was it, Prop 47, for example. Like when we were over there, and that kind of way. I've been there on a number of occasions. So in terms of my engagement, I look more towards the nature of our communities per se. I'm sort of inward focused, really. In the context of Masjid Warthin, if you look at Masjid Warthin over the years, it's like I think Maha, I have to say, for you, you were the one who invited Hisham Al-Usi and I think Sheikh Yusuf for the fundraiser that we had X number of years ago. I don't remember how long ago it was. But it's like it came by your suggestion and invitation and your interconnectedness. It wasn't me reaching out in terms of that. So consequently, I don't know what that says about what the quality of the engagement. I think that everybody has to have their own sense of proactivity, just like Amila said. He said, "I will not be ignored." She didn't say that today, but I think in one of our other meetings, she says, "When I go, you're gonna know I'm there, and you're gonna recognize. I'm not imposing myself on you, but I'm not going to be, treated as invisible." So in the context of the best engagements come from those who voluntarily reach out, and I think that there's this mutual need, which I know is coming in later parts of these webinars. But you have some people have more strength. I don't count it as one of my strengths. I have to, we're Muslims, not Catholics, but it is a confession. Sheikh Abdul Rauf Nasir, he really is like the tentacles of Masjid al-Warthin. It's like he's the one that reaches out and touches people and bring people in. It's not an excuse. It's just, it is what it is, and I'm grateful to Allah for it. So I would pin a lot of my quote unquote, I'm going to call it lapse in this moment of connection personally, is because it's like most of my work is really inwardly focused on many levels. I don't know if that's what you asked, but that's what I answered.
Yeah. That's a great answer. Imam Abu Qadir, do you want to add anything to what you've already said? You said quite a bit about the nature of the relationships that you've had. You're in a community where you have like people coming from all walks of life, all different backgrounds in your mosque. Did you want to add anything to the nature of?
Yes, all of the experiences haven't been positive in terms of the intercultural exchange between Muslims coming from different countries, different educational backgrounds, different income levels. So there have been tensions, some of which are just natural tensions that exist. And then there are some people that bring baggage with them. And they may want to open their dirty laundry in your house. Let them know that this is not a place for airing all of the problems you had at home here, because we don't necessarily have those kind of problems. Some people come and they have problems with authority figures. So myself being the imam, then they see me as a problem because they come from a culture where they're accustomed to having problems with people in authority. And so those have been some experiences that I didn't necessarily welcome. And some people accused me of discriminating against them when I told them they were no longer welcome at our center. And these were immigrants. One brother in particular, he talked about, he went to CARE and said he was going to sue the Muslim Center because I had allowed him to give a khutbah and he thought he had a job. And he said I was discriminating against him and what have you. So I informed the organization that he appealed to. Well, he's already embarrassed himself in front of our little small community. If you want to give him a bigger platform to embarrass himself some more, you're welcome to do that. But that was a individual case. It wasn't, I wouldn't ascribe his actions to a group of people. You know, that was a very unpleasant situation. And he also reached out to the Interfaith Council with his complaints. And, you know, and then later on, he ended up in a situation that let everybody know I wasn't at fault.
Sounds interesting. So let's go ahead and move on. How many times have non-Black communities helped you in fundraising support or asked you if you need help? It's an important question because many mosques in our area, in the San Francisco Bay Area, raise hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they've raised upwards of $1 million in some of these events. So the money is always there. But how many have actually reached out to you and to see if you need any help or have supported you in fundraising?
As I mentioned, frankly, the real outreach was the one occasion that you had done. I do have to say about the sponsor, I think his name has already been mentioned. I don't want people to start beating a big path to his door. It's been a little while, but he had given, you know, a few thousand dollars. I mean, they, you know, which were, you know, how can you say, outlier contributions for persons of it. He was, you know, he was just that kind of person. But in terms of that, I'm kind of hedging what I'm saying just a little bit because I know there's another program that's coming. But there's a side of us that really, part of us is that we'll accept help that you are willing to give, but we're not gonna really go out to ask you for it particularly, unless there are some particular projects. I know that inside of our community, I'll take the Houston community. They have demonstrated a model of a relationship with immigrant Muslim communities that was very much grounded in a major project and projects that were well supported. Again, he has a different kind of personality. Also, that I'm speaking of Dr. Imam Wazir Ali. And I mean, so we have some real fine examples of those who help out, but then also sometimes it's like we're not actually looking for help. So it's not like, you know, of course, you know, people who can give should give, but then if you always have to be asked to give, then you're not really giving. And a person has their own sense of dignity depending on what it is. For projects, it's wonderful in terms of support, especially projects that are going to benefit everybody for as far as that concern goes. But in so many instances, it's like not looking for anything, and so I'll leave it right there. There's a lot. There's a lot to it because we come from an orientation of independence, an orientation. So we're actually disinclined to quote unquote ask for help in general. We're not averse to it, but again,
but we all need money, Imam Fahim, to be able to survive. I mean, ING
yes,
raises.
No question about it. But again, see, here's another thing. Now we want to talk about African Americans, Bilalis, etc. It's like, look, some of us we didn't even know we were poor until we moved out of our neighborhood. You know what I'm saying? It's like everybody has different ideas about what it means to be poor, to be needy, etc., etc. And it's sometimes that idea about Bilalis and African American Muslims is overblown, because just because we don't have what others seem to have, you know, descriptively speaking, is that, oh, y'all must be living bad. You know, I said, no, it's just like your profile in terms of what it takes to have a good life, or i.e. middle class or whatever. It's like we operate from different definitions. So then when you start talking about happiness and peace and satisfaction and well-being.
That's fair. That's a fair point. That's a fair point. But I think, but there also needs to be sustainability and growth in communities.
Yeah.
So Imam Abu Qadr, what's your experience in getting help from immigrant communities? I know that you've reached out. I know that you have, because I've seen your emails. How has the response been?
You're muted.
You're muted.
My experience has been with individuals in the San Francisco area and from the surrounding area. I've received a considerable amount of financial support from working class people. I'm talking about people who punch the clock 9 to 5, that have jobs in city government, have jobs in medical industry. I'm not talking about multimillionaires. And I've received substantial support from them consistently over the years. And I have, I've also never received support from a community. One exception, one of the communities assisted us with some transitional housing that we were working on for individuals who were marginally in need of assistance temporarily, and we received some support in that way. We also received unsolicited support from the individual that Imam Fahim mentioned, his generosity. We received unsolicited support from him.
So let me ask you: has the East Bay Mosque, the one that you helped in fundraising, did they ever help you?
No, not at all.
We haven't.
But the leadership changed. They didn't help us, not because the character of the whole project changed. It went from progressive-minded Muslims who were trying to make headway in politics and education and government. I would say it almost took a regression in terms of that mosque turned like Tabliki. You understand what I'm saying?
Well, I know the mosque that you're talking about, and they raised quite a bit of money. Sister Amila, have immigrant communities, have they helped you at all? They come to you because they need to distribute food, and they know that you're the person to go to reach the homeless and to reach the poor, and and so forth. Have they offered financial support for your organization, excluding what you and I did together?
Yeah, because I was going to say that just happened yesterday. So, so if we're talking over history, so subhanallah, bismillah. So to answer your question, not enough for me to have a commercial kitchen as of yet, to do the work that I do. one of the things that, so everyone has their niche. Everyone has what they're good at, right?
Yeah.
And so everybody knows I'm good at feeding people.
Yeah.
But I'm not good at that business plan, and I'm not good, you know what I mean? That's and I won't say that I'm not good at it, but that's not where I put my focus. And part of my work, and I said this earlier, for many years, I wasn't doing my work under the quote unquote umbrella of the nonprofit organization that I've co-founded, because for me, it was more like worship, you know what I mean? And so I wasn't wanting to take it to a because homelessness has increased so much, because, you know, our we have such a need. There's a need to take it to the next level. But for many years, I wasn't. It was, we get a box of chicken, we get some food, we cook it, we feed people, you know. And it's easy to get someone to give you $100, $200, $300, $400 to feed the people. It's easy to get someone to give you $2,000 to feed the people. It's a whole nother thing when you start asking for $350,000 to run a program that's going to feed people. And because then there's requirements, you know, and there's these requirements, which rightfully so, that's the world we live in. But you know, sometimes, and I say this with all due respect, you know, it's like to have to turn these cartwheels and swing from chandeliers to be able to feed the people, you know what I mean? And alhamdulillah, I'm working that out, you know what I mean? And I have some people who have joined the team, and they're going to help us get that business plan, and they're going to help us do those things to be able to take this to the next level. So I don't want to be unfair in saying no, because that the ask that is coming now is a recent ask. Before, the ask was, help me feed the people on Saturday, and people would help us feed the people on Saturday.
Actually, now, you never asked. You actually never asked. The work that we did with you was not an ask on your part.
No, it wasn't.
It wasn't. So you know, your organization is eligible to zakat and sadaqah, and a lot of the charitable organizations in your position collect like up almost $1 million, because we have to give zakat. We have to give zakat and sadaqah as well. And so what we need to do, well, I think what we need to do is also publicize the work that you're doing, because you're eligible for zakat, and people and Muslims have to pay zakat. So I want to go to the next question, but did you want to finish up? Did you want to finish up real quick?
So this is what I am going to say, that I do believe that if I wasn't a Black woman asking, that there would be a different response, because you know, it's an uncertainty. I can feed the people and I can lead you to the people, but can I direct a project of that level? And so, and I'm going to own that. I'm going to own it. I'm not going to put it on anyone. But I would just say, as to the community and to those who are looking and listening, you know, when I say I need $350,000 to make this program and be able to feed people 5 days a week, and you look at another organization that raises similar amounts of money and may not feed the people as many times a week that I'm attempting to, what is the response? And why is there a hesitance, you know, for a work that I have plaques that I have in my house that says this is the work that I do. This is the work that I've been doing over the years. And so since we're talking about racism, I'm just going to put that out there. You know, what would be the response if I was not, if I was an Arab woman, or if I was an Indo-Pak woman?
Thank you. So liquor stores, so I know that we have liquor stores that are owned by Arabs in inner cities, in both Oakland and San Francisco. And I just wanted one of you to explain what the problems have been in association with these stores. And I know that there was a local effort a while back. I don't know if you were, if you, Imam Fahim or Imam Abu Qadir, were involved in that effort to either get them removed or to have them end their business, or to change the way that they operate their business or not. but have you been successful in changing how they operate? Were you involved in the effort? But can you just speak to the problems with some of these Arab-owned grocery stores that are in Oakland and San Francisco, if they are a problem? Everything that I've read about these places, problems in Chicago and elsewhere, are they problems here? And were you involved in that effort to? I know Imam Zaid was, but were you two involved in that effort to try to get them to change their the way that they operate?
Yeah, I think it has to be recognized that it was Your Black Muslim Bakery, according to my memory. It was an extreme act on their part, going in, smashing up the properties, and it's got to stop or what have you. But it was an act, and that was really what sparked what we joined on to after that. And I don't know if it can be read like well, we put the cream in the black coffee as opposed to taking it somewhere else. Now I don't subscribe to that particular kind of action, but also we should not act like it was the quote unquote so-called Sunni Muslims that decided we need to do something about these liquor stores. I think that it sort of became a cooling down, in a manner of speaking, from what and how it started. So, but otherwise, the problem of liquor stores, of course, is a problem anyway, and it's one of those first places that. Well, generically, I'm going to say Arabs, but I know that there's a distribution from the various countries, and yes, liquor stores were a problem before Arabs had it, and as it is with alcohol.
Has anything changed in these liquor stores? Are they still doing what they've been doing? Has there been any change at all?
Are you finished, Imam Fahim?
Yeah, no, you go. No.
Yeah, there has been some changes, and also I was at the first meeting when Imam Zaid got involved. Myself and Imam Zarif were present at the first meeting when we decided we wanted to do something about the liquor stores. And Fahim pointed out it was initiated by the action of Your Black Muslim Bakery at that particular time. One of the things that I'm aware of that has changed, many of the Yemeni liquor store owners who used to own liquor stores sold liquor stores. Now, many of them are in fast food businesses. And the people who purchased those liquor stores from them, especially in West Oakland, I'm not sure about East Oakland. I haven't did a demographic survey or anything like that, but the ones in West Oakland are now owned by Indians. And to give you a background, Ali Muhammad, I'm gonna credit him with this statement. He said they've been doing a tag team on us. At one point, the Jews had the corner stores in our community, and then they tagged the Chinese in. And then the Chinese came in and got their money, and then they tagged the Italians in. Then the Italians got their money and they tagged the Arabs in. So this has been going on generation after generation, where people, merchants come in our neighborhoods and set up business, and sometimes sell us inferior products and products that are also potentially attract crime. Liquor stores attract crime. There was a demographic study done about wherever there's a proliferation of liquor stores, there's an increase in robberies, there's an increase in domestic violence, there's an increase in vandalism and things of this nature. It's all associated with the liquor store. The San Francisco Muslim Community Center, we embarked on a campaign against 211, which was an alcoholic beverage targeting minorities. We did an educational project. We passed out over 50,000 pamphlets in the targeted areas where this beverage was being marketed. and it was done with the support of the San Francisco Foundation, the San Francisco Health Department, and the Muslim Community Center. And we train young men on how to go out and organize in their community and resist those type of influences.
Okay.
But it's not a problem.
Okay, so it's what? I'm sorry?
Tell them what 211, why 211 was the focus.
211 was a beverage, and it means 211 is also the penal code listing that for armed robbery. And we can say the alcoholic beverage lends itself to robbing people from their human potential. At the time when rap music was made popular, the least demographic that drank alcohol in America was African American men from the ages of 16 to 35. That was the demographic that used the least alcohol of anybody in America. So when they me and my 40 and all of this just sipping on some gin and juice, this was targeted marketing to a population that could greatly enrich you know, the industry. And then they were using billboards at that time in our neighborhoods on these Arab stores with these young rappers promoting liquor. You know, some of them they gave them their own brands. There was one popular rapper from my neighborhood. He came out with a drink called Slurricane.
So it sounds to me like in Oakland, it's the liquor stores in these corner liquor stores in predominantly African American are no longer run by Yemenis or are no longer run by Muslims.
That's not true.
In West Oakland,
I didn't say that. I said
in West Oakland, many of the Yemenis sold off.
Okay, so okay.
There's still just about everyone that I can think of right now. Everyone I can think of right now is Arab.
Is Arab. Okay, Muslim, Arab, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I mean that's presumed. I mean they have women with kimar behind the counter selling alcohol.
Oh my God. Okay.
That's what I want to speak on.
Go ahead.
That's what I want to speak on because West Oakland is that may be the case. In East Oakland, that's not the case. And when you ask what is the problem, one of the things that I want to address is in the African American community, when the Nation of Islam was present, there was Islam was a respite for the community.
Right.
But when you have liquor stores and those liquor stores are run by Arabs, and there's Quran playing in the background, and they have la ilaha illallah on the back of their cars, and their wives are walking around with niqabs and their sisters, you know, and there's this whole Muslim present, yet they're selling pork and alcohol. The problem is that is poor dawah. That's the biggest problem. It is some of the poorest dawah that can exist in a community that needs dawah. So for me, that's the biggest problem. The other biggest problem is that the men will marry the African American women in attempt to getting papers. And that's another problem because they come here, they don't have papers, they need to get established. And so they marry these women, they have babies with these women. And a lot of times those relationships don't last. And so like, I don't know if we wanted the real answer to that question, but that's
yeah, no, there's this is a huge conversation. You know, I've read a little bit about it, and to know that this is a huge problem, and it's a conversation that I think we need to take up and to be able to help with, because if these people are Arab speaking people and they're you know Muslims. I think that absolutely the immigrant community can potentially help in this area, or at least improve their operation, improve their relationship with the local community. I want to go on because we're way into this conversation, and I have a lot more questions. Let's see. To your knowledge, how many non-Black mosques and organizations have African American Muslims on their boards or staff. Imam Abu Qadir, could you mute yourself? Great. And then only, if you could mute yourself, that would be great. And then just only turn it on when you're ready to speak, but there's a lot of static coming from your area. So again, I'm going back to mosques and organizations. How many non-Black mosques and organizations do you know that have African-American Muslims on their boards, that are on their part of their staff and among their volunteers? And I wanna disclose the fact that right now, ING does not have any African-Americans either on their board or on their staff. Now, Imam Fahim was on my board for more than a decade at one time, and we changed our board in terms of and we just added a lot of entrepreneurs on our board, and we've never had an African American staff person, but I've had a lot of African American speakers, Sister Amatullah Sabri, Brother Abdul Karim, and today we have Sister Naima Johnson. And so forth. But I must confess and disclose the fact that ING is one of those organizations that could do a lot better in diversity on its board and in its staff, not just from the African American community, but also from the Latinx community. But to your knowledge, do you see a lot of non-Black mosques and organizations that have African American Muslims on their boards or staff? Because when we looked around, we didn't see any. I think
I don't know any.
CARE. I think CARE actually has folks on and both their staff and their board now that are African Americans. So there's diversity there in the CARE organizations, I believe. ING has been on and off, but we haven't seen it in mosques. Okay, children. To your knowledge, do you have any idea how African American Muslim children are treated in Black day or weekend Muslim schools? Just based on your knowledge from what you've heard from friends or go ahead, Sister Amila.
What I will say is this. I moved back to the Bay Area. I was living in Sacramento, and I moved back to the Bay Area so that when my children, before I solely took on homeschooling, because I wanted my children to go to school with Muslim children that looked like them, whose hair was like them, who like theirs, and and that they felt comfortable in. Because for myself, growing up in an African American community, and I think I said this before, my community was what my community cradled us. Like, we didn't know that we weren't this racism. We didn't know it because we were it. You know what I mean? And we were, it was us and the Nation of Islam. For me, I'm gonna just say for me. And so my encounter with the non-Black, no longer immigrant community was as an adult, and because, as Imam Fahim Shuaib said earlier, I'm one of those people I'm gonna walk into a room and you're not gonna ignore me. But I'm not going to put that on my children. I wasn't going to subject my children to having to navigate in that way. But because we still bow down where they bow down, so to speak, my children, were still in other communities. And when they were with me and they were next to me, they got the same treatment as me. But to send them into classrooms and to, situations where I wasn't there to go, Assalamu alaikum, what's your name? Would be, unfair to them, because I was aware of the racism that was there, whether it was purposeful or just, kind of like part of the furniture. I don't know.
Yeah, no. So as I was doing my research on this, I actually came across a document that was done by Zeba Iqbal published in January 2016, and now it exists on the ISPU website, that's called Meeting the Needs of Muslim Youth, Getting Race Right. So I haven't read through the document, but obviously it was important enough for her to write this document. I've also had my own experiences, but I want to hear from you. Imam Fahim, Imam Abu Qadir al-Amin, do you know of African-American children who attend non-Black Muslim day schools?
No.
And how has their experiences been? Imam Abu Qadir? Is he frozen? No. Okay. All right. He's saying no. Okay. Are you saying no?
I know the San Francisco Islamic School ran by Kashif Abdullah.
Right.
They have a few African American students in their school.
Right.
They're a minority. That has more to do with the fact that San Francisco is a family unfriendly town. African Americans can do better and can afford to buy property. Unfortunately, they're not always able to purchase property in San Francisco. So we've lost a lot of families that have school-age children to the East Bay, to the North Bay, to Sacramento, Ville, Antioch, Pittsburgh. But it doesn't have as much to do with racism as the fact that the demographics doesn't support families in San Francisco.
Right. So it'd be really interesting to ask those families, those Black families, Black Muslim families who are now forced to attend, weekend schools, Islamic schools, and day schools in predominantly immigrant or non-Black communities, what their experiences are like. Okay, let's move on. And I want to now go into the individual and personal level. Have you ever experienced a general assumption? Imam Abu Qadir, could you mute yourself again? Just mute and unmute yourself. That would be great. Okay. So the first question is, have you ever experienced a general assumption by non-Black Muslims that you are a recent convert as opposed to being born into Islam or having scholarship or a long history in Islam? Does that happen to you when you're among immigrant Muslims or non-Black Muslims? Imam Fahim?
Well, yes. I mean, as a general rule, anybody who happens to have a question about it, they operate first from the presumption that I am a convert or revert to Islam. And it's pretty hard not to be wrong about that, because, I mean, you
but you're also a
find
scholar.
10 African American.
You're also a scholar. You're a thought leader. No, you are.
Inshallah. Alhamdulillah. Inshallah. The point is that it's not something that I don't think that comes out of racism as much as it comes out of just experience, because you find 10 African Americans, 9 of them more than likely are going to be reverts, converts, or the like. Unlike Amila, taking Amila for example,
she's born into Muslim family.
Born into a community, or like an Imam Wazir, et cetera, et cetera. It's in that, and I think that there's a very, very important part of this whole conversation that needs to layer down to my children, right? And those children. When I say my children, I mean the generation coming after us, because there's so many things that were, let's call it roadblocks, bars to entry, absence of quote unquote success stories and competencies, et cetera, that are now present in our children, right? So in that context, it's like persons like myself, Imam Al-Amin, and others of my generation, we were like, we call ourselves pioneers, right? We were the ditch diggers, we were the foundation layers, we were the ones that held it down and made families while our children come out, and they didn't have to fight some of the same fights that we fought. And then many of them were able to follow the paths like many of our non-Black families who came over here and went to school and had children. So some of the obstacles that they had to face and overcome, and things that they had to work out for themselves, their generation after them didn't have to work out in that way and were able to advance further. So I'm saying in the context of the seeing what Al-Islam is now, is looking at it through the eyes of those who are children of those early reverts. That is, that second generation born to Muslim parents. That's the question, I think. But if you talk about me and people in my demographic or my age group, the presumption is that we are reverts, and it's not wrong for that. But the lack of awareness of the fact that there are children of these people who are, never had pork past their lips and never smoked cigarettes, drank alcohol. They weren't converted from anything. It's like, I was born a Muslim, and I make me think about a song that we sing and get me singing in here. Born a Muslim, gonna be a Muslim till the day I die. That's Wilma Siddiqui, but I gotta shut up. That's it.
No,
that's where we are.
okay. Imam Abu Qadir. I think people probably know you enough now that they would never assume that about you, that you're not that you have a long history.
Yeah, I've been associated with Islam for 53 years of my life, and since I was 17 years old, with an effort toward practicing. But earlier history, my first exposure was when I was 14, 15 years old. It's not offensive if people ask me that particular question. It speaks to the power of Islam to transform people's lives. So that's a part of what our community was about, transforming people's lives with our belief in Allah, belief in Prophet Muhammad, belief in the Quran, belief in our own leadership and our own responsibility to ourselves. So one of Fahim earlier was the idea of us having this can-do spirit. That whether we got help or not, or wherever or whoever, we were going to get the job done, because we feel that this is our responsibility to establish our Islamic life where we live, and we're going to get the job done. We're still determined to do that.
You're not deterred.
Friends and allies that also want to partner with us in that, but we're not asking somebody to drive a car for us.
No, I've said this in past webinars, that I've always felt that the folks that come out of the Nation of Islam have this sense of dignity and confidence, and that is just really quite noble, and I feel that's just a sort of a reflection of what the fact that you embody Islam so beautifully, and which is wonderful. Sister Amila, do you want to speak to that?
One of the things I want to speak to is that, as they say, it's also a Black thing. That the dignity is something that our grandmothers who were staunch in the church taught us as well. And our grandfathers. And so it's not just Nation of Islam. It's really, the Nation of Islam enhanced, you know what I mean, and cleaned up, but that dignity was something that our ancestors instilled in us.
Well, let me add to what I meant. You're not trying to be Arab. You're not trying to be South Asian. You're not trying to be anybody but yourselves, and that is that's an important characteristic. Have you ever experienced non-Black Muslims correcting your practice or understanding of Islam, assuming that you don't know what you're doing? The fact that you have a history.
I have one just that is just a funny story to me. I was in Vallejo one time, and it was around Eid, and I had my daughter and one of my nephews with me, and one of my nephews, he wanted some hat or something for Eid, and I walked into a store, and while I was in the store, a woman came up to me, and I was in hijab, and the woman came up to me, and she wasn't in hijab, and she had on a short skirt, and she said to me, "Are you Muslim?" And I was like, yeah. And she says, "Are you fasting Ramadan?" And I said, "Yes, I am." And she goes, "Do you pray?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, and then she asked me, did I know how to make wudu? And I said,
"Lady, I was born into Islam. I can
oh,
teach you how to do wudu."
I was
No, you didn't say
laughing, and I wasn't as mature as I am now. So my energy was less laughable. and the guy that she was working with was a non-Muslim. And it was, but the fact that she felt like, as she was standing there looking like an American girl, and I'm standing there in hijab with my hijab daughter, she's asking me all these questions. But what the guy said to her was, "You don't pray, you don't fast Ramadan." and so why are you asking her all of that? And so it was so funny to me, because
that is funny.
she was attempting to embarrass me, but she embarrassed herself, because her dawah to her co-worker was, "You never pray. And you said you don't fast Ramadan because of, and there was this whole thing." And so, I thought my nephew.
We got hers back.
Right. But for the most part, I can say, I think people are pretty surprised that I was born Muslim, and that my mother is Muslim, and that my parents were Muslims. They're surprised because, as Imam Fahim Shuaib said, many times we are reverts or, convert, whatever the person considers themselves. And so they're surprised. And so it's more of an, like, really, you know what I mean? And when I say my grandchildren are fourth generation Muslims, it's just like, it's for them, it's like, it's an oddness more than a, and again, I don't get a lot of like, and it may just be the way I move with people. There's a lot of questions that I think people might ask other people that they don't ask me. So, just because it might not be, they don't.
I think, Sister Amila, also you have a strength of character that that helps you a lot. I think a lot of people who are maybe may not, mashallah, may not have that level of confidence. Imam Fahim, did you want to say something, or?
Yeah, this just generically speaking, like, I think that a part of it, I'll stay in-house. Believe it or not, short story. There's a way that I moved early on, even as a part of the Nation of Islam and part of the transition of Imam Muhammad. And there were actually some people who thought I was actually taking something. I mean, they thought I was like using some little kind of drug on the side or something like that, because I was always too happy, too excitable, too much glad hand. So we must be on something, because this is not real, right?
These are other African Americans? African Americans?
Yeah.
Wow.
So I would take it outside of that. That when a non-Black, dismissing the immigrant label, see us and our excitement about Islam and our energy and our conviction and our commitment and the like, but they know that they come from a space where there are millions who are Muslim, but they don't have that same kind of energy. They don't have that same kind of drive and spirit and ibadah in that sense. And so I said, this must not be real. It must not be real. It must be artificial. So I need to test you to find out if you're really a Muslim or you are you're on some other kind of kick, So
how do they do that?
So these kind of questions become quizzes to see, are you really a Muslim, or are you got some kind of cultish connection with it? And people down and they say, if you used to be a part of the Nation of Islam, some of them try to obliterate your al-Islam. Oh, you're from that. Oh, you're from there. So what stuff is not real, or what have you. So you have that. I think the point is that I believe that among some Muslims who have come from other countries have kind of fallen into the situation of separating religion and culture the way that the Jews have separated. Some Jews have separated religion from culture. I think you probably do have
Christians,
who would otherwise be labeled as Muslims who are actually atheists. Because of the fact that of all of the, horrible things, yes, that have happened in certain Muslim countries, some of them imposed by the Muslim leadership and others by geopolitical moves on the part of everybody who everybody knows. Then as a result, it tested their faith and broke their faith and made this separation. So then when they see someone who is integrated on that and in the belly of the beast, it's like, come on now, is this real? And yeah.
Sister Amila, do you wanna jump in and say something about that, about the passion or about the spirit of African American Islam that I've witnessed and that I've seen? And before I was married, I would travel from San Jose all the way to Oakland and San Francisco to attend your Jummahs because of that. Because as a like a new almost convert in a way, a revert. I was born Muslim, of course, but I wasn't really a practicing Muslim until until much older in life. And I would travel the distance just to go to your Jummahs because I felt that it spoke to what I read in the Quran, to what made me become a practicing Muslim. Do you want to speak to that? Because you were nodding a lot when
No,
Imam.
I was agreeing. I'm sorry. My nodding was I was amening it. I was the amen.
Okay. Yeah.
Because I was relating to what he was saying, and so there's not a lot to add, and what I would say is that I think, and especially for Muslim women, and again, and I said this earlier, a lot of times in the Arab and the Indo-Pac and the we're calling it the non-Black Muslims communities. Subhanallah. There's a lot of separate, it's the sisters with the sisters and the brothers with the brothers. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm not saying that's a good thing. I'm saying that is the thing. And in the African American community, there is a different kind of interaction. So there is a different kind of feel, and being that we're talking, I'm not going to get into that because even for me, sometimes it's nice to be in a room just with sisters and you don't have, this, you can kind of be free and, you know what I mean? And if mothers that got a nurse, they can nurse and, you know what I mean? And if it's hot, you can kind of loosen up the hijab, there's all that kind of stuff,
Yeah, but God help you if you're not a mom and you want to talk politics with the guys. I mean, it's God help you.
And that's what I'm saying. And so for someone who doesn't ever have that opportunity to find this kind of euphoria in the African American community, I could see that because it's a whole new world. You know what I mean? That is that's not the usual. And so that's the only thing that I would add.
Yeah, and the reason that I'm straying away from saying immigrant Muslims, because I do think that the children of immigrants also have a lot of growing up to do around racism and around race and racism. And I think that we absolutely need to have anti-racism programs in every Muslim space in the country. And I highly recommend Muslim Arc, the organization. I've watched them do a little bit of the work online, and they're amazing. And and I wanted to mention the case of Majdi Wadi, who was the CEO of the Holy Land brand in Minnesota. I don't know if you've heard of the story or not, but apparently this was around the George Floyd killing, the protests that followed. But it was discovered that his daughter had apparently tweeted or posted really anti-Black, anti-gay, anti-Jewish posts, and her father actually had to fire her from his own company. So we're not just talking about immigrants here. As you said, many of you have had really positive experiences. It's also their children, and I think it's just, and I think it also just reflects America, which we're gonna talk about. I just
before you
go ahead.
I just want to ask. So making it non-Black Muslims, I don't understand how that doesn't, how saying immigrant doesn't include the children of the immigrants. Like, how does it not include them? Even if they're born here, they still have that language, they still have that heritage, they still have those whatever beliefs that they're being socialized in their communities. And so for
you
me,
think we should call them
calling them non-Black kind of, in my opinion, takes them off the hook. That's just my opinion.
Okay. Yeah, no, I wanted to include the next generation. We're now in the third generation. So my nephews and nieces that were born here now have children. So we're talking about now, several generations. So I'm going to ask a few more questions. Then we actually have to sort of close. And I want to these are yes or no questions. I'm going to skip the one about converts, the treatment of converts, white converts versus African-American converts, how they're treated in the mosque, because I've seen a lot of differences. Absolutely. White converts are embraced, African-American converts.
So don't skip it. Mention it. Don't skip it. Mention it. And if you need to move past, but don't skip it because
okay. No, this is definitely. And I wanted to ask you, have any of you been invited to the homes of immigrant community leaders for social events with your families? Have any of you been invited? Yes or no? Just maybe yes or no answers because we need to wrap up. Amilo?
So you're just saying leaders, not my friends. You mean
leaders. And the reason I ask this question is because it happens a lot. They frequently have events. And have you ever been invited to these with your families?
No.
Immigrant? No?
I'm going to say no, but if I was and I heard about that one time, please may that person forgive me.
Okay.
But I'm going to say no. But if there was one time.
Thank you, Sister Amila. Imam Abu Qadir, have you been invited to homes with your family? Sister Hafsa and the kids?
Yes and no.
It's always a mixed bag with you.
No, I'm trying to be honest. I don't want to.
No, I'm kidding.
I don't want to deny something that's happened that was positive. But I have been invited, and my wife as well, to people's homes. Sometimes it would be a wedding party, and I'd be officiating, but it was still in their home.
Okay.
And then there have been other times when I've been invited to people's homes who were fundraising and organizing around their political aspirations, but it was in their home. So
okay.
Yes.
Okay. You have non-immigrant, I'm going to say immigrant now, immigrant Muslim friends, Sister Amila? They're like, part of your shilla, your
Yes, friends? Yes, I do. Yes, okay. I do.
Okay. And Imam Fahim, do you have them?
Go to lunch, go to the movie type buddies when there was no COVID-19.
Yeah.
No, but others also know that that's also not a part of my temperament. Generally, you won't find that to be the case. If you just said mess with a theme, it's not something that I'm not. It's hardly could be a point of pride, but I respect that everybody has different temperaments.
Yeah, true.
And so my temperament is just it's not. I'm not as much of a socializer as I may seem in that sense. So no, not as a general rule. There are those that I'm very, very friendly with, and I'm very happy when I see them. But they're not. I don't search them out to say, "Hey, what you doing tonight?" That kind of
the hangout. Okay, all right. And I think Imam Abu Qadir, do you want to add to the answer that you had before about having non-immigrant Muslim friends that you socialize with?
Yeah, I actually don't. I don't socialize like that with immigrants for the most part. There have been situations where we've been at social events together, but it was of a cultural nature. But we didn't go together as buddies. Hey, let's go to this event together. We just ended up being there and exchanged our pleasantries and what have you. But normally, no.
If you were invited to people's homes, would you go with your family? Imam Fahim, if you were invited, would you go? Or like Ramadan iftar or
Sure. But you know, when you
Eid party.
yeah. I mean, it's fine, but I think we have to, you know, just have to respect the fact that the relationship tension has to be cultivated first in a more
Of course.
more public space, and then become comfortable enough to bring people that much closer to you. And that's for both of us, both the immigrant and
Sister Amila, do you?
What was your question?
Would you go if you were invited more to these Eid parties?
I do go when I am invited. I go when I'm invited to fundraisers, when I'm invited to barbecues. One of my favorite barbecuers is a Palestinian, and literally when they barbecue, they no, seriously, his wife or his daughter texts me and says, Baba has some chicken for you. So I have hummus in my refrigerator from a friend of mine. You know, but again, I socialize a little bit different. And so, you know, and the most of the immigrant friends that I have, I met them at African American masjids. You know, so alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. So I had questions about intermarriages between African Americans and non-Black Muslim families, which are quite rare. I don't see them though. I remember one couple, an African American man Muslim man who married an Indian Muslim woman, and I know that her family wasn't too happy about it and broke off relations and so forth. It's the only one that I'm aware of. I don't know of many. Maybe they happen in other parts of the country. Maybe you know of some Imam Abu Qadir in your community. Are there a lot of intermarriages between African Americans and immigrant Muslims?
I wouldn't say there are a lot, but we had a doctor who was part of our community, also a part of Imam Fahim's community. He was on both sides of the bay, supporter. He was married to a person from the Indo-Pak area, and I saw him recently, and they're still happily married. And this is after 25 years. And there are a few people from African American women marrying immigrant men I'm aware of that are still having a viable marriage and happy together and still working and still practicing Islam and loving themselves and loving their community. But those are rarities. That's not the norm. And just mentioning that, I remember once I was invited to MCA and I was on a panel and someone asked the question, why would I even be there when most of the people in the room wouldn't be pleased if I was seeking to marry their sister or their daughter? And my answer was, well, number one, Hafsa would have something to say about that because I'm already married. Down here looking to marry somebody. That wasn't my purpose for being there. So a lot of times people have the mindset that whenever African American men are around women that are beautiful, that they're going to be swayed by their beauty. But beautiful women in every ethnic group and men choose or are chosen according to interests. So people with different interests come together, and eventually we'll see more marriages as people get to know each other and they get away from the colonial influences and the influences of white supremacy. As it dies out, some of its influence is also going to die out in the minds and spirit of the people.
Yeah, and this is a beautiful segue to the close of this. I also had questions about children. If Black children have friends who are immigrant or children of immigrants or not, which I think is incredibly important. And that's exactly how families also come together. Is that their children are friends, and then their families end up being friends as well. So we have a long way to go. Somebody pointed out that the geography has been a hindrance Um, uh, if you could mute your webinar, thank you, Imam Abu Khadir. Somebody pointed out, well, geography can also be a hindrance, because you know, African Americans live in this part of town versus you know, versus immigrants live in that part of town. But I don't think that that's the case. I think that there are enough African American Muslims that live in the South Bay, that live in the East Bay, that live throughout the Bay Area. And it's, you know, it's not that distance to go sort of to go to the mosques in San Francisco and in Oakland, where they do exist. So I wanted just to close to talk a little bit about intra-Muslim racism, because we know that it exists. Other, you know, people have written about it, and surveys tell us that you know, that there are people that have confronted racism in immigrant communities. I wanted just for you to speak about the root of the problem of intra-Muslim racism. Where do you think it comes from? And I think Imam Abu Khadir just sort of started us on where it might come from. But Imam Fahim, do you want to sort of comment, and then we'll go back to Imam Abu Khadir and Milam?
Yeah, alhamdulillah. Certain, you know, when you talk about bigotry as relates to one seeing oneself as better than someone else just on GP or just because, then that's one thing. There's a certain nature to tribal affinity and tribal preferences, etc. It's when it gets exaggerated, and when you make your tribe the standard for all other tribes and the like. I subscribe to the
default Muslim. Yeah.
I subscribe to the idea that it's the caste system. We actually have a caste system, and racism is just one of the workers or the primary worker for the caste system. So the intra-Muslim, let's call it disconnect, I think it rests a great deal on the fact that there has been an absorption of the values that the values of the caste system in terms of dominant, subordinate idea, all based on color, that those coming into this country not wanting to be consigned to the bottom rung subscribe to the values and the perceptions and the stereotypes of the dominant caste. And in some cases, to prove their worthiness to be counted among the dominant caste by distancing themselves from the subordinate caste, whether you're Muslim or not. So there's this bleeding over of what keeps this society in its order, that some immigrant Muslims subscribe to in hopes that that assimilation will earn them a pass in relationship to the dominant group. And you know, it takes their getting offended enough times, I think, for them to recognize, well, no, it's not there. And now you have to turn around and learn how to relate to people on basis other than color. And that lesson hasn't been completely learned yet.
Right. We're going to talk next time in the final webinar about how to counter this in our own community, which we need to do, because many of us, and I think Muslims are very much active on civil rights. In fact, there was a survey that was just done today. I think it was issued by Care National. You know, what are the priorities that Muslim Americans have, and I think civil rights was right there on at the top of a list of things that they were interested in. And if we haven't overcome the racism that exists within our own communities, we're not going to be very successful in overcoming racism against us as a people. And that's why this is really important work for us to do. Imam Abu Khadir, do you want to sort of add to what Imam Fahim said about the root problem? And then Sister Amila? You have to unmute yourself though, Imam.
Yes. I would like to add that one of the ongoing challenges with the African American community, and I'll add in parentheses the African American Muslim community as well, is we're still not viewed equally as human beings. So before you get to the civil rights, we're still regarded as potentially dangerous, inherently criminal, this potential villain type. That's how we've been cast, and that's in the hearts and minds of people in the society. So when things play out, like the individual shot in the back 7 times the other day because he was having some kind of domestic quarrel and was trying to leave the scene and just get in his car and leave, that's because he's not viewed as human. So some of that is still how we are viewed in the society. And there, unfortunately, those views are shared by other people who also hold dear the values of the dominant culture in the society.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think you've heard this before from other speakers on this topic in the language that is often used in Arab and South Asian communities to refer to Blacks. It's incredibly derogatory language that they use. You know, I don't know what it is in South Asian languages, but in Arabic, it's abd. You know, I grew up with a Turkish grandmother who would often use that term and when in referring to African Americans. It was shocking, and we would try to tell her, "Mom, you need to. I mean, Grandma, you know, please stop. You know, doing that." And she just didn't understand. You know, she just didn't understand. But it's not just with my grandmother. It's not just with my grandmother's generation. It's actually quite common, unfortunately, in some corners of the Arab community. Go ahead, Imam.
Yeah, my reaction to that is Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he gave a new meaning to that terminology. So we see it as an honor. It's an honor to be the Abdullah.
Yeah.
So we're the Ibad of Allah. Now you can mistake us and think us that we're here to serve you. You can make that mistake. You're gonna come to a painful awakening, because we're Allah's servants, and we're not trying to establish Islam for the pleasure of any human being. We're seeking Allah's pleasure. If other people are not pleased with us at all for us saying Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah, and then we're going to raise our families to love Allah, to love His messenger, to love His book. If you want to misclassify us, that's a sin that's on your soul. And it doesn't affect me at all if you think like that towards me, because I'm going to go on about my business and leave you in your ignorance.
Right. MashaAllah. MashaAllah. Sister Amala, did you want to say anything on this?
No. They've covered it very well.
I mean, a divided community cannot survive, and this is my greatest fear for I have a lot of concerns, with the American Muslim community, but one of them, I think, and I'm so glad what's happening in the country is happening because it gives us the opportunity to actually address intra-Muslim racism, which we need to do. And I'm hoping that this will be, what's been happening across the country in the last several months is going to be the beginning of major change that happens. And we're doing this for our donors, and some of those donors sit on boards of mosques. So people are watching these, and so hopefully they'll do something with these things. I want to go ahead and close and say thank you so much, Jazakumullah khair, for agreeing to do this with me. I really appreciate it, and for being specific in some of your answers. I really appreciate that. I know that you have a lot of friends also in the immigrant Muslim community, and this is a sensitive conversation to have. But hopefully, people watching this will approach you to want to talk further about it. That's my hope. I'm going to put this out in our local Shura Council list, and in the hope that people will watch it. And I'm urging the viewers to watch this webinar and the previous webinars to understand this issue further. And please feel free to use the questions that I came up with here and to add to them, to change them. And consider doing a survey in your own community to measure the intra-Muslim racism that may or may not exist. I suspect that it exists everywhere. And so in the next webinar, we're going to address how to counter institutional and personal racism. This is going to be on September 9th. We will have all of the speakers that were here with me today on that webinar, in addition to all the ones that were here before, Imam Zaid, Dr. Mensa Bilal, Dr. Jamila, Imam Muhammad, and we'll be joined also with the full ING team to have this conversation, to come up with ideas on how to be a more inclusive whole community. And so I want to thank each and every one of you again for joining me this evening.
Thank you.
All right.